My grandpa always taught me to fear rainy days. He would tell me these stories about Red Vark, the local maximum security prison. He would tell me about the violent criminals and the deeds they did to end up there. He would explain to me how some of these men were so dangerous that they couldn't be trusted to live in normal jail cells, that they needed to be chained to the stone walls. My grandpa would tell me about the rainy days and stormy nights, how the rain would weaken the stone, and how these men would pull the chains right out of the wall if the weather was bad enough. He showed me newspaper clippings of escapees. There was always a handful each year. He would tell me that, to a T, the prison breaks always coincided with rainy weather. Most escapees would flee to the surrounding neighborhoods. They would try to hide in people's garages and basements, even under their porches, waiting for the rain to pass. Sometimes the men would break into the houses. Sometimes the men would do unspeakable things to people residing in those houses. We lived only 8 miles from Red Vark, and on those rainy days, my grandpa would remind me of this. My grandpa would tell me that, on those rainy days, it was best to just stay in my room, to lock my door, to put some music on low, grab a comic book, and get my head somewhere else. He even taught me how to turn my closet into a fortress of solitude. We threw a blanket and a couple of pillows in there. I kept a box of comic books and baseball cards in one corner, and a metallic footlocker filled with junk food and cassette tapes in the other. My grandpa would encourage me to get in the closet when it rained, especially when it stormed. I would sit in there, listening to my Walkman. I would finger through comic books. I would bundle myself up against the pillows and drift to sleep. I felt safe in my closet, and I enjoyed the hours that I would spend in there on rainy days. He would tell me that most of the time during escapees, the convicts would usually only hurt people they happened to come across. If they broke into a home to avoid police, and there was a family sitting around the TV in the living room, they would strike. He would tell me that if a Red Vark prisoner escaped, and if they came into our neighborhood, and if they broke into our home, that as long as I stay in my closet, I'd be okay. It would be possible for a convict to find and hurt me, but as long as I stayed in my closet fort, I would be as safe as anyone in town. I would remember this on rainy days. I would sit in my closet and think about it, and it would make me feel safe. My grandpa disappeared one June. I lived with him alone. My parents had died years earlier. When my grandpa disappeared, I was too afraid to call the police. I knew if something happened to my grandpa, the police would take me away and force me to live in a home. I didn't want to live in a home. I had a home. I kept his disappearance to myself for over a week. I would even walk myself to school. I knew where Grandpa kept emergency cash, and so I would take a little here and there to the corner of bodega and buy some milk and sandwich meats. One day, about 8 days after his disappearance, they let us out of school early. Storm of the century, they said. Thunder and lightning, and heavy rain all night long. The rain was so heavy that night, the local streets flooded over. On the walk home from school, the water was practically up to my ankles. By 9 o'clock, the water was coming up to people's knees. I got home, climbed into my little hiding space, and covered myself in a blanket. Thunder clapped outside. I was very afraid. The storm itself unsettled me. But thinking about Red Vark and how easy it would be to escape during a storm like this terrified me. After some time, the house lost power. For a while, I sat in the closet in the darkness. I turned on my Walkman for solace. After a few hours, the music started to stutter. Then, after a few more minutes, it stopped altogether. Unfortunately, the batteries from my Walkman were dead as doornails. For a while, I continued to sit in silence. The power still hadn't come back on yet. The darkness and silence enveloped me. Then, the silence was suddenly broken by a scratching noise from some distance. I ignored it at first, but it grew louder and more insistent. Finally, I reluctantly left the safety of my fort. In the upstairs hallway, I stopped and listened. The noise was clearly coming from downstairs. I descended the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I got to the kitchen and stopped to listen again. The noise still sounded as if it were coming from below me. We had no basement, so the fact that the noises were coming from beneath me was unsettling. There were more noises now too, not just the scraping. Then, I thought I heard what sounded like moaning. I crouched low to the floor and began to listen. The noises got louder as I entered the living room, even more louder as I entered the main corridor. I stopped on a throw rug at the end of the hallway. The noises were at their loudest here, below me. I pulled the throw rug and saw a trapdoor. It must have led to a basement or crawl space. I had no idea it existed. I had no idea there was anything under that rug. I was curious to why it was padlocked. I grabbed a ring of keys that hung on a hook in the mudroom. I tried the keys in the padlock one after another. The fourth key slid into the lock perfectly. Then, out of nowhere, something pounded against the bottom of the trapdoor. The sound was followed by muffled voices. I couldn't make out exactly what it was, but it sounded like, "Hello, Abby there?" I listened harder, but still had no luck hearing what the voices were saying. Then, I clearly heard, "Help us!" I understood that and turned the key and lifted up the trapdoor. The worst smell I've ever known wafted up and hit me in the chest. I instantly heard a woman crying and a man's voice sobbing. "Thank God, oh thank God." Then another man said, "Water, please, we need water." The next few days were a whirlwind. Police, media, and gawkers descended on the house. Our small town in Arizona never saw much excitement. The news of a homegrown serial killer sent an electric jolt through the populace. The media, of course, were relentless. The police had a million questions. Where is your grandfather? I don't know. Did you know what he was doing? Did you help him hide his secret? No, I said. No, never. Did you help your grandfather bury the bodies in the backyard? No. You must have helped, they said. No. You must have helped. An old man like that wouldn't be able to dig in the Arizona clay all by himself. Right then, it hit me. Rain, I said. The police looked at me blankly. What? He'd wait for it to rain. Gentlemen, due to a story last night, I feel the need to break an order I was given and tell you about the Missouri goatman. Now, I'm a chemical guy, and we all go to Fort Lost in the Woods to do training. This happened during an FDX out in the woods, next to a ridge and large stream bed. Every night there is a roaming guard of 2 privates, and we have our little blank adapters, and we just roam around making sure no one is having sex. This happens one night when me and a buddy of mine are posted on a couple of stumps by one of the light systems they drag out there. About 3, me and my pal are set up under the lamps, soaking in the warm exhausts because it's 25 degrees out, and hell if we're going to be moving. We are watching the tents, joking how, if anyone was going to do the nasty, it'll be due to the cold, etc. I nudge my friend and tell him to catch a nap. In no time he's snoozing in deep sleep. Snow is slowly drifting down through the trees. It's truly peaceful. I'm just kind of staring into the woods when I hear the crunch of snow. It's extremely faint, so I have to perk up my ears to make it out. I begin to think to myself, there's no way some idiot's going to freeze his nuts off for some girl. Must be a drill sergeant. I nudge my buddy awake and tell him there's a DS in the woods. He begins to perk up, and we are now both watching the wood line. Sure enough, we see a shadow come in from the wood line, crouching low. Amazing he can be this quiet in the snow. We both grin. Last time this happened, they dragged someone out and tied them to a tree for laughs. The shadow gets well within the camp line, crouching really, really low. Looking back at it, I know how strange this was. A tent rustles and the shadow instantly stands up to full height. Damn, it must have been 7 feet tall and had horns on its head. Buddy and I suck in our breath, and our eyes are wide. This is no drill sergeant. Whatever it was opens a tent flap really slow and peeks inside. At this time, my buddy has found the little radio we were given in case we need to contact the drill sergeants. My buddy is freaking out to get them out here, which causes them to freak out and come ghosting out of the shadows. They statty us, and my buddy begins to yell. Then, we all hear a loud grunt. All our heads turn to see this goat thing dragging a goddamn private. One soldier begins to yell, "It has a female private! It has her legs and it's dragging her out of the camp!" Nothing really happens for what feels like an hour. Just this surreal stare down with the creature. A female drill sergeant screams out a war cry and launches herself at a full sprint at it. The rest of the drill sergeants pull out their pistols and charge down to try get the private. We hop up and run down, scrambling to grab the girl and haul her away. The drill sergeants have taken off to chase whatever it was away from camp. As we are dragging the girl away, the entire camp is up now and setting up a perimeter around the AHA and chow tent. Those are both 2 areas that have constant light. Everything is now horribly tense. Everyone has their bayonets in their hands. Drill sergeants come back an hour later, looking worse for wear. Everyone loads up in the Humvees, and we drive the hell out of there. Apparently the drill sergeants had chased the damn thing over a creek, at which it took off into the underbrush. The female soldier was okay. Whatever it was had smothered her till she passed out. High Command was weirded out, but didn't seem phased and had simply made the DS's carry fully loaded M4s for the next rotations. That was their way of basically saying, "Oh, big scary goat man? Nah, don't worry about it, it's bigger guns." Yay, army. There are tons of these stories, of people just tearing ass out of the woods in full kit blubbering and getting discharged due to mental instability. I myself only have one other story, and this is from a friend of mine who went to a MP training here. My friend was out on their last FTX in the dead of winter. He is set up with 3 other people in a tower overlooking a huge expanse of woods. Scheduled up for attack happens. Everyone's having fun shooting blanks. Suddenly, a couple of dudes come barreling out of the woods carrying a guy who had a tree branch lodged in his thigh. Everything stops and everyone leaps into action and drags him to the FOB. He's screaming and crying about the deer man. Drill sergeants instantly scramble for their M4s and get on a loudspeaker, demanding every private into their little hutches. Drill sergeants break a major rule and hand out live ammo to everyone. Things are now more tense than ever before. The guy is still screaming, "The deer man, he's out there! Jesus Christ, protect me, the deer man!" He continues to scream until the medics arrive. On a scale to 1 to 10, what's the surest you've ever been at any one moment that something absolutely sinister was looking straight at you? I'd rate my experience earlier tonight about an 8. I was driving home from my parents' house around 10 PM. They only live about 10 minutes drive from me, but what a difference 10 minutes makes. They're out in the country, no streetlights. It's Michigan in the middle of winter, and I'd made the terrific decision to take a relatively unkept road home. The same road where I collided with a deer not 2 months ago, instantly vaporizing my Christmas fund. It's deer central out there. Well, I was headed down this road at about half the speed limit, eyes peeled for some 4-legged, white-tailed terrors, and my eyes were starting to get strained by the headlights of an oncoming vehicle. It was at least a half-mile away, but the high beams were on. I guessed it was a truck, though I didn't want to look too closely, and then be blinded to some fury wrecking machine sauntering out in front of me. So I kept my eyes off that side of the road as much as I dared. As I got closer, I realized I was right. It was a pickup truck, but it wasn't heading towards me. It was parked on the shoulder, and the emergency lights were blinking. I slowed down even more, waiting to see the telltale signs of a deer collision: imploded grille, cracked windshield, missing side mirror, and obviously a deer corpse. Once I was alongside the pickup, I hadn't seen any damage. Now that I was out of the headlights' glare, I could see that the truck was pulling a horse trailer. The trailer must have been wired in, because the red lights on the back were blinking on and off in time with the emergency lights on the truck. I rolled down my window to talk to whoever was in the cab, but once I looked closer, I realized the truck was empty. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. Then I heard the scraping and thumping. It sounded like someone slamming an upside-down bowl on a surface repeatedly. It was coming from behind the trailer. I looked out my windshield and saw a loop of rough rope making up part of a knot around the handle on the back of the trailer. I couldn't see the rest of the rope, but the knot seemed to be sliding up and down the handle a bit. I inched forward in my car, peering around the corner of the trailer. Suddenly, movement startled me. Then I realized what an idiot I was. The rope led to a harness fastened to a horse. The large, brown creature was scraping and stomping its hooves on the ground, standing close to the ditch, stretching its rope across the back of the trailer. As I pulled up further, It glanced at me, snorted, and went back to stomping. Thinking I was probably irritating it, and knowing there were no other cars for miles, I switched off my headlights. It kept stomping. I looked at the ground around its hooves. The snow was tossed up, and in some spots, the horse had chipped off bits of the dirt shoulder. He'd been out there a while. "Hello?" I called again, fully expecting a response from the dark field on the other side of the ditch. Nothing. I looked at the horse again. Steam shot from its nostrils. Then I looked back at its hooves and the ground around them. I'm not a Boy Scout, but fresh snow makes it fairly easy to piece simple stories together. In the brief, flashing intervals of dim, red light afforded me by the trailer, I was easily able to make out boot prints alongside the trailer, obviously coming from the cab. They turned and led along the back of the trailer, then into the ditch, past the bubble of red light. Then there were the same boot prints coming up from the ditch, accompanied by hoof prints. Presumably, this guy's horse had gotten out of his barn or pasture nearby, and he was out here to retrieve it. That was my Columbo moment. Then there was the whole area in between the horse and the side between the trailer closest to me. I could see boot prints, but they weren't in a straight line. They seemed to be all over the place, pointing to everywhere, like a person jumping around or hopping from one foot to the next. And mixed in with them were other prints. The new prints looked a bit like the inside of the peace sign, a Y with an extra line in between the forked lines, about twice their length. There was no real sole or pad, but each toe, if you could call it that, was thick, at least a couple inches wide. At the end of each toe print, including the long rear protrusion, the handle of the fork I suppose, the snow seemed to have another flaw in it. Not an imprint really, more like a slit, like from a claw. These prints were as mixed up as the boot prints were, but tended to stay closer to the road. Whatever made them, the guy wearing the boots would have to get past it to get back to the cab. Out from the mess of prints, both human and, I guess, animal will do, erupted a straight line of boot prints with long strides headed back along the road, away from the truck and trailer, past the edge of the red light. They continued into the darkness that I knew would be uninterrupted until the first streetlight a mile away. The other prints were mixed in with these ones, weaving in and out of the same line. In other words, following. Their strides were at least as long as the bootman's. I stole one more look at the horse, still clearly agitated, and at the prints right behind the trailer. Now obviously, snow being white, and the trailer pulsing red lights, all the snow in the range of the lights was going to be red. But I know it wasn't my imagination that some patches here and there were a different shade of red than the rest. And, with the dim light and the horse's dark fur, it was hard to be sure. But I thought a few long lines were glistening down the animal's side. I like to think I'm not a stupid man. I saw no benefit in staying here to play detective. I decided to distance myself from the horse, trailer, truck, and prints. I flipped my lights on and started rolling away. The horse never stopped staring at me. I swear, it had the closest thing I'd ever seen on an animal to the expression of a homeless man who hasn't gotten a penny all day. But, as I pulled forward, I just wasn't able to take my eyes off the footprints and whatever prints on the side of the road. About 10 feet past where the red light would have ended, there was another scuffle. Both sets of prints mashed together. Definitely a couple spots of dark pink snow, and then just the boot prints, continuing their journey. But off to one side, they'd left behind a much larger imprint, roughly human-sized. There were shapes on both sides of the body. They were wide and somewhat wrinkled, like the imprint of a jacket a child would leave after laying in the snow. They fanned out from the man's body, leaving drag marks, like something unfurling. They were also ribbed. I admit I was only viewing this in passing, but I swear I know what I saw. It's hard to describe exactly, but thinking back, I'd say that comparing that shape to a snow angel would seem wrong in more ways than one. I kept moving, picking up just a bit of speed, but I was still going fairly slow so my tires wouldn't burn out on the snow and ice. I could see the three-toed prints moving from the larger shape back to the chase, just for a few feet, and then they just ended. The boot prints carried on for another 40 feet or so, and they ended too. At this point, I had to stop. I don't mean that I really decided that I wanted to. It's like my brain just needed to verify that I was seeing this right. Two sets of prints, one human, one not, both just ending. No sign of change, of course, or a dive into the ground or anything. Pure, untouched snow on all sides. Well, not totally undisturbed. I think something in my brain was just misfiring at that point, trying to make it all fit. And so I looked back, once again at the trailer and truck, highlighted in a blinking red aura. I could see the horse, still watching me. And then in the road ahead of the truck, something shifted. It was the truck's headlights. They bounced. The truck's taillights also bounced. Just a slight dip toward the ground, and then back up, like a brief pressure on the suspension. The trailer shifted a touch. Now the horse wasn't looking at me. It was looking at the blank space above the truck and trailer, the spot on the roof of the trailer that no light could reach. And it was straining against the rope, harder than I've ever seen anything fight in my life. My tires burned out briefly before they found traction. So, that was my 8 moment. I really lost count how many times on the way home I nearly slid into a ditch. I went sideways once, but I always kept control, using some combination of luck and sheer force of will to not get stranded on the road tonight. Now, I'm in my driveway, and I'm wishing my garage door was working. Because right now, I'm having a 10 moment. The porch light is illuminating a portion of the roof on one wing of my house. All around me, the freshly fallen snow is undisturbed. But in that one little corner of the roof, I can make out a pair of imprints marring the scene. I probably don't have to describe them to you. My front door is maybe 30 feet away. 30 feet. I'm wondering if I should try sleeping in the car tonight.